Assalamu alaikum, good afternoon, and welcome to the final session of today's event. I know it's quite challenging to make it interesting after having witnessed two interesting speeches, so I am really taking this challenge. Our colleague have gave a brief introduction about myself. I'm into strategy and project management consulting, and my core interest is basically how business and corporate strategies are cascaded downwards in organization that reflected in project management, and the opposite direction, how projects are helping to reflect the organization and corporate strategy backwards for adding value for the organization. We are witnessing today industry revolution number 4, version number 4, and all of us are really overwhelmed seeing the kind of emerging technologies that has been taking place, starting from AI, smart technologies, 3D printing, automation, robotics, and a lot of them. But are we really required to dig deep into every single technology that we come across? We belong to a particular industry, and we don't have to do that. I believe that what is more important for us is to understand how each of these technologies are making an impact on the way we do business, how we make our processes doing better with the help of these technologies. This is an interesting observation. The study has been done by MIT and Deloitte last year. Traditionally, every new technology has been embraced at the first place by industries such as financial industry, banking, ICT, education, healthcare, pharma, and all. Can someone show me where is construction line? And are we really surprised to see that? I'm not. Simply because for the last 100 years, construction professionals have been happy to do things the old way. And we are still going to do that unless somebody convinces us to go for some digital platforms. Therefore, if you talk about any particular industry going upwards for digitization, you will really find it hard to find a case study on construction. Today, I'm going to try to examine how blockchain technology, one of those emerging technologies, going to improve construction industry. Due to very strict time constraints, I'm actually compressed and I cannot touch base most of the functions and knowledge areas of project management from a construction industry perspective. So we'll just examine a couple of case scenarios how blockchain technology can improve those processes. Before we move on, can we have an idea about how well are we in understanding blockchain technology? Can we have a raise of hands?
Yeah, sorry about that. But about the blockchain technology, which is actually a growing technology nowadays, particularly in Emirates, most of the government, some of the government entity, they are using blockchain just in order to remove the intermediate and then make it more visible to the end user.
Okay, great.
One concentrated database. To dig anything, we need to search various documents and things. Now we have blockchain, means all the things can be seen in one particular platform.
Both answers are sticking to the core of the technology, but it's not covering the entire features of the technology.
Thank you. This technology is allowing the customers to store their documents in a secure and safe place or platforms.
Storage of data without immutable. That's one of the features.
It's smart, secure, and tamper-free.
3 features. 3 features. Excellent.
It's to ensure.
Okay. We have time constraints, so allow me to move forward. So let me, for the sake of starters, let me go through the brief history of how blockchain have evolved. The last few decades, we have seen the emergence of internet. The internet has been really the internet of information. So basically, we were able to send information in the form of files, for example, as a PDF file, a PowerPoint, or a spreadsheet to another person. So when I'm actually sending a file, I'm not sending the original. I'm actually sending a copy to that person. So if I make a change to that file later, or if that person make a change to that later, that is not necessarily reflecting to each other. For information exchange, that has been a good source. However, if I want to send something of really valuable, like money or financial assets, bonds, stocks, votes, intellectual property rights, any land title deeds, these sort of things, sending a copy to somebody is a terrible idea. If I send you $1,000 and I'm still keeping the original with me, does that make any sense? It doesn't. Yeah. So, cryptographers around the world have been trying to find a solution for this problem for a long time. And we have been actually managing to do this with powerful intermediaries in between, like financial institutions, banks, credit card companies. These sort of entities were helping us as intermediaries to transfer money from one person to another person. But still there are growing problems. Number one, they are having a centralized system which is susceptible for hacking and cybersecurity threats at any point of time. Number two, they are retaining all KYC information of every single customer, the available data of every person. So, in 2008, started by the Lehman Brothers in the United States, the financial industry crashed. Just by coincidence, around the same time, anonymous person or persons by the name Satoshi Nakamoto, they came up with a research paper. This research paper was presenting a cryptocurrency called Bitcoin and an underlying technology which is called blockchain. So this technology was actually addressing the problem of double spending, how two people can transact each other without an intermediary on a peer-to-peer basis. We are going to examine how they are achieving that. So, let me go back to the same example that I just mentioned. If I want to send $1,000 to some person through Bitcoin blockchain, I'm actually transmitting this message to the blockchain network. And there will be a group of people called miners. They are basically volunteers and they are getting compensated by value of Bitcoin. So every 10 minutes, all the transactions that is happening on the blockchain will be validated through certain algorithms and achieving a consensus. And once it is achieved consensus, it will be added as a block and it will be added to the existing chain of blocks and it will become unlockable. It's unlocked. Now, if I want to hack my transaction and I want to do some fraud on that, how do you think it's possible? Simply, if I want to hack that block, I have to hack that block, particular block, and the previous block, and the previous block, and the entire chain of blocks in the blockchain network. Not in just one computer, but across the entire computer systems in the network simultaneously. So I don't think it's possible for a human being. So that's how a blockchain becomes immutable, as you said, transparent, and it is basically operating on a peer-to-peer system. I'll tell you, from where I stand right now, you know the chicken nuggets that we eat. Do you think if you get the chicken nuggets and somebody asks you to make a chicken back from the nuggets, I give you the nuggets and I'll tell you, make a chicken back from the nuggets. Do you think it's possible? If that's possible, perhaps this will be possible. Thank you.
Excuse me, I have got a point here. No, see. Yeah, sorry. I've got a point over here. Does blockchain has to do with the data integrity, consistency, and transparency?
Yes, transparency is one of the buzzwords, and we are going to walk through that later in the presentation.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hello.
Yes, I think you are underestimating the hackers. Now it is not implemented widely. Whatever they done, the previous history, it is very easy to do them. I think so.
Let me tell you a very simple example. You have cash stored in a central location, in an isolated room, in a locker. And I have kept the same cash in front of a crowd on the table here. Which do you think the thieves will attack first? In the locker. So this is a simple example between a centralized system and a decentralized system. So blockchain is completely decentralized system. There is no single person who is owning the network. It's on a peer-to-peer basis. Millions of users are watching the network at any point of time. All right. We'll just walk through some of the popular phases of blockchain. We just mentioned about Bitcoin. Can anybody knows what's the price of Bitcoin today? $10,000. And 6 months back, at the beginning of the year, how much it was? Yeah, 3,000, something around 3,000. And 1 year back, it was around 15,000, I remember. The point here is that it's highly fluctuating, but still it is very attractive as an investment. And many more countries are growing their confidence in accepting cryptocurrency into their economy. After Bitcoin, another blockchain came into existence. It was introduced by a university dropout from Toronto. His name is Vitalik Buterin. He introduced a system called Ethereum with a cryptocurrency called Ether. And the significance of this technology was that he introduced the concept of smart contract for the first time. So we are going to talk about smart contract later. The third one is Hyperledger, which is widely used among enterprises for their private blockchains these days. I think it's the most popular blockchain for organizational purposes. It's owned by Linux Foundation and maintained by a consortium of more than 100 companies. These days we are hearing about a new cryptocurrency which is being induced by Facebook called Libra. And again, Facebook is not the owner, but they are just taking the initiative. So we are going to see a lot more cryptocurrencies taking into our real life quite soon. Mycelia is another blockchain platform. It's purely for the entertainment industry. We just mentioned about the intermediaries. The creators of artwork, music, songs and all those, they were suffering from a problem of not getting fairly compensated because of the intermediaries. So Mycelia have made an end to the problem. So they were able to transact directly with the end user and getting fairly compensated. Ripple and R3 are some financial platforms purely used for by financial institutions. A wider classification of a blockchain based on two parameters. We have the public and private category and the permissionless and permission category. On one end of the spectrum, we have the public and permissionless. An example is Bitcoin blockchain. So anybody basically can join the network at any point of time and start mining and start trying to find their fortune. Or at the other end of the spectrum, we have the private permissioned closed kind of blockchain, which is basically used by organizations for their internal distributor ledger technology purposes. And lately, we have seen the emergence of a third category called hybrid blockchain, basically involving more than one companies are collaborating each other. Just in the case of supply chain management, we'll come to that. So this is a hybrid blockchain. I don't want to spend time on the numbers, but just got a whopping statistics here. For example, a 60 billion US dollar is expected to be savings by financial institutions for the next 5 years by adopting to blockchain technology. Here I'm just going to concentrate on the last line. 100% of government services in Dubai will be expected to be on blockchain by next year in 2020. So just like our colleague mentioned about Burj Khalifa, we are witnessing a lot of other innovations taking place in front of our eyes. I just happened to see a roadmap which is basically how they are making the 2020 is a reality. The Dubai real estate have a blockchain platform. They have started it from 2017 and expected to complete the entire transaction on blockchain by next year. The blockchain applications is widely classified into two, static and dynamic. On the static part, we are able to store static information just like our digital identities, land title deeds, and all those static information, which is immutable and secure. On the other side, we have the dynamic part. The transactions are taking place and smart contracts are executing, self-executing smart contracts. Sorry for getting a little bit faster because the clock is looking at me and I'm really getting haunted for that. So, yeah. You don't really have to go for a blockchain implementation for every business unless you meet any of these criteria. So, if you have a set of contract to execute between different entities, if you need an intermediary to validate some of the transactions that you make, or if you have a database that has been shared with different people, I'm not just talking about one organization, about multiple organizations from different parts of the world, for instance, then you might get a lot of value by going for a blockchain. Now, as I said in the beginning, I'm just looking into two or three areas in the construction industry, how we can apply blockchain on improving the processes. Currently, the contract management has been a pain point. How we address that? Ronald Coase has been a Nobel Prize winner in the last century, and he raised an interesting question: why an organization exists at the first place? And his answer was that because if a business to exist, it has to acquire resources in terms of human resources, materials, and all those equipment and everything. So if you don't have these resources in-house, you have to acquire them from some external party. So if you deal with every single external party, that incurs a transaction cost. So in order to remove that transaction cost, you try to infuse everything in-house to your organization. That's how the organization comes to existence and it starts growing. So the cost of transaction comes from one single point that he discovered is trust. And he defined trust with 4 attributes: the honesty, accountability, transparency, and integrity. Now, I think, as we spoken earlier, most of these attributes will be addressed by blockchain technology. A typical construction project involves multiple stakeholders, perhaps hundreds of companies, and perhaps thousands of processes. So if you talk about every single relationship between any two particular interfaces, that every single interface have a transaction cost, and it's a complex network. So every single project is by definition is unique, right? So for example, if you find a group of, let's say, 25 companies have taken part in one project, that's not necessarily that those 25 companies will be taking part in the next one. So every single project, you are starting with uncertainty. So in order to address the uncertainty and reduce the transaction cost, you have to find a way how you can improve the trust. So I remember when I was working in my previous organization, we have a huge department, legal department. Typically, a construction company doesn't have a bunch of lawyers, need to have a bunch of lawyers. But usually, this group of people are sitting idle. I mean, they don't have something to do, but the company is preserving them just for saving money in the future, forecasting the probability of going for a litigation and going for claims. So they see it as an investment to get some claims and winning a variation in the future. The point here is that companies are investing hugely in order to win their litigations and disputes between organizations. What if we have a system of transparency and trust where people are trusting each other by default? You don't have to establish trust. You don't have to depend on a contract terms and conditions to buy trust or by force. Supply chain management has been the next case, and I don't have to talk a lot about that. We have already a brilliant lesson from Mr. Srikanth about that. If you talk about a typical supply chain from the source, raw material source, until the project owner, we have every single pain points, we have an uncertainty. Starting from the transparency and traceability. As you have mentioned about the potato, as an end user, how do I ensure the actually that's the second one I'm talking about, the provenance. How do I know where the potato came from? So the origin of materials is completely ensured by using a transparent mechanism. In most of the cases, by regulatory requirements, it is mandatory to have certain materials should not come from certain origin. Certain materials have to be coming from certain origin. So this sort of provenance related requirements has to be ensured with certain mechanism. And information exchange, if I am at point number 6, my point of contact is most typically till point number 5. I don't have an access to point number 4 or point number 3. But if I have a transparent system, which all are part of, I will be able to track any material at any point of time. And the third one is asset management. Typically, we have seen companies are using their own individual information systems for asset management purposes, and they face interoperability issues. What if we have a common system that all companies can share information with? So, having talked about those challenges, let's see some cases where we can add some value with the help of distributed network. In construction, on a day-to-day basis, we are dealing with a bunch of paperwork. So, at any point of time, if you have a change in design, just assume how much process you have to follow to get that design approved from all those authorities involved. And documentation has a configuration management system. We know how much big a department it is and how many people are really working on that. What if we have a system that have all stakeholders are part of the system, starting from the government and regulatory authorities all the way down to the suppliers, and everybody are involved in an approval process and all the change management process. Okay, I'm skipping the other two for the time being. So I'll just go to one example how a blockchain-enabled contract management will operate. Smart contracts are basically self-executing contracts. So just like we prepare a physical contract, you list down all the terms and conditions. And the problem there, if any one party is not really interpreting it the right way, we have a dispute. And there is always room for gray areas. But the smart contract is basically the terms and conditions are coded. Let me show you how the architecture of a smart contract. So every single terms and conditions are coded, and it will smartly execute once the time is reached. So these smart contracts talk about a term that a construction contractor will be compensated so and so amount if the temperature is exceeding 40 degrees. So if the temperature is exceeding 40 degrees, the smart contract executes itself and the contractor will get compensated. Now, if you ask any contractor, we have many contractors here, what is the single biggest headache today for a contractor? Payments. So, what if you have a system that you achieve a milestone and the next day morning you have the payment immediately coming to you, automatically. And once you get the payment, all the subcontractors and suppliers coming under you are also getting sequentially paid. So a smart contract will just do that. So that ensures trust, and that ensures a seamless passage of cash flow. Contract administration is a big department for most of the companies, and they have to invest a lot of resources for that. what if we have a contract which is transparent and self-execute? You don't have people to do that for you. And avoiding litigations between organizations. It's not just about avoiding litigations, it's about preserving your relationships with your clients. Oops. Okay. This is a typical architecture about a blockchain-based supply chain network. So right from the beginning, the raw material supplier all the way down to the end user are all part of the same network. So at any point of time, any entity have an access to the information about any flow of materials. So this is achieving 100% of transparency.
So I've got one question here to you. Change management is very important process in.
Sorry, you have to stop the stopwatch.
Sorry. Change management is one of the important process in the contract management, where the change are delivered through a change request. When this in case of smart contracts, how the change management will be addressed? How the change is it flexible? The smart contracts, how the change will be imbibed in it?
Well,
changes. Flexibility with respect to the change management.
Okay.
Yeah.
Understood. Smart contracts are basically starting. There should be a starting point, right? So at the outset, both parties have an understanding what are the agreement terms and conditions. So this will be coded on a logical way to a program. A smart contract is a program, a computer program executing itself. So if you have a change, for example, just like any software system, you have to incorporate this change with the agreement of all parties involved. So once that change is incorporated to the system, then the smart contract will start acting according to the new system. So the point here is smart contracts are possible to be changed with the consensus of all parties.
So approval or will be required by all the stakeholders in this case.
Exactly. Yes.
Thank you.
All right. So this is the kind of hybrid blockchain system that we just mentioned in the previous slides. A hybrid blockchain is comprising of different multiple companies who typically take part in a supply chain. The last example is about equipment leasing that comes under the asset management case. Most of the construction companies have to acquire heavy equipment as part of their project, and they do that by leasing. So usually the leasing process is very tedious. You have to get insurance, you have to get a monitoring system, how the contractor is utilizing this equipment and the status and all those things, the operation maintenance of the equipment. So what if you have a system, by the way, this is an IBM blockchain, a truly developed case of a crane leasing. So every equipment is identified with a digital identity and entered into a blockchain, and all the transactions and negotiations will be added to the blockchain, and real-time monitoring, status monitoring, and payment mechanism will be automated. We don't find any reason to have a smooth run. So typically the challenges in implementing blockchain technology will be coming from different perspectives. The first one is technical. Currently the computing power of Bitcoin blockchain network, the entire blockchain network, is estimated to be 20 times more than the entire Google servers around the world. Just a couple of days back, I read in some country they have seized a group of miners because they have been consuming 1 megawatt power for their computing equipment. So the computing power for blockchain network is immensely large, both in terms of the server and also for the electric power. Secondly, a blockchain transaction, a blockchain can accommodate up to 7 transactions per second, but the validation happens only once in 10 minutes. So if you have hundreds of thousands of transactions taking place simultaneously. It cannot afford to wait for 10 minutes. It has to happen. So this latency lag has a technical limitation. Construction business, as we said in the beginning, have a laziness, and lazy starters are always lagging behind in adopting any digital technology, not just blockchain. So we will have a problem to take confidence from the construction industry. People are not really aware of the technology yet, and if you have to be a confident user, you have to have a good idea about the technology and why we are adopting to this technology. In terms of return of investment, we have seen the last couple of decades, most of the companies have migrated to ERP systems based on that current information systems model, and they have made already huge investments. So they don't find a real reason why we have to change to another information systems at the moment, jumping from an ERP system. So they really have to calculate the return of investment from that perspective. And finally, the most modern BIM technology that is being used widely in the construction can be perfectly integrated with blockchain network. So we will have a trusted information system. For example, in the design and construction phase of a BIM, construction phase of a project, the editing privileges of different stakeholders in the BIM system can be negotiated and put in a smart contract. So that will be a truly integration of the BIM system with construction, the blockchain. At the moment, we don't see anything of this happening quite soon, at least in the construction. But as we have seen, Dubai government is taking this technology really forward. We know that Dubai Health Authority is also taking big strides in adopting blockchain in the healthcare system and land development, and I think DY is also taking their strides. Yeah. Okay, I think Smart Dubai, they are championing the entire. So I hope someday we will be able to talk about how so-and-so construction project have adopted blockchain technology successfully. So we are looking forward for that. Thank you.